team? Welcome back to episode 2 of the Easy Run Show. I'm Eric. This is my
I'm
co-host Zach.
Zach Trailblazer.
Nice. Before we get into our warm-up, let's talk about our main set topic. What do you got going on for us today? What's your topic?
Well, I thought about it. I have a lot of topics, but this one seems to be at the forefront for me personally this week, and that is coming back from injury into the running world again. And I kind of want to touch on that. And then I did a deep dive on plantar fasciitis and like shin splints. So I want to kind of like roll those all into one.
Cool. Awesome. My topic, I had I had an original topic on health and longevity, which kind of goes with what you're talking about. But something came to me today that I want to save the health and longevity in running for next week. But today we're going to talk about being nervous before the
Nervous.
competition.
Okay.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's gonna be good. All right, so let's start our warm up. And I kind of like the warm up to reflect on our last episode. And I had a message from one of our good followers on the channel, Troy, who also came to one of my run camp in Arizona. And he was responding to my topic of last week about how, and I didn't really express this. My topic last week was about if aid stations and cutoff times were enabling runners maybe in a bad way. And this was no way my opinion. It was just a topic to put out there. And we talked about it. And I want to read Troy's response or the latter part of his response. Let me pull it up here. And so, he kind of gave and I'll say Troy is also doing several 200 milers this year. So this is how he ended his comment. Given the time, cost, and complexity of races where multiple pacers and crew members may be involved, the cutoff time ought to balance these considerations whenever possible.
Yeah.
So, my question is when cost and time investment of people traveling, taking time away from work and family to do these 200 milers, is there an unwritten obligation for the race director to accommodate people finishing?
I have an opinion.
Yeah, let me hear it.
So when I am looking at races and I see cutoff times, and I'm not even looking at 200 miles, I'm just talking about a race, that could be a 42K mountain race. For instance, let's say Zagama.
Yeah.
The Zagama cutoff is like less than 8 hours. So for me, that excludes me.
Yeah.
So the smaller the cutoff, the more exclusion you are of the community. So when I look at a cutoff, if it's a pretty generous cutoff, then that gives me a vibe that the race is probably inclusive for all abilities, all skill sets, all levels. So that is a really big indicator in my world of a race. And I was even looking at a race in Japan that is Mount Fuji. Its cutoff times are insane. It's like 4 hours or something for um, I didn't think it was like a 35K or 40K. I mean, that is eliminating a ton of people. So I think the longer the cutoff times, as long as a race can sustain it and they have people that are, at the aid stations, the volunteers, and they have all that built out, the infrastructure, I think longer the better, man.
Yeah, and using you as an example too, when you went to MCC at UTMB, the cutoffs for you were so tight that you essentially had to sprint from aid station
Yeah.
to aid station faster than appropriate race pace just to make the cutoffs.
Yeah. I wasn't spending any time really. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and then I carry my own stuff, which, kind of also is another, I can't even use the aid station, like for me, it's just a checkpoint. So, I mean, if they would have built in some cushion, then I could have properly raced, you know?
Right, right. So, all right, let's dive into our main set then.
Well, I have one thing I want to talk about real quick as a
Great.
warm up. The lottery for New York City Marathon was yesterday, and they had over 200,000 people apply, which is up 22% from the year before. So it kind of plays on the running culture, how it's growing. 22% year over year is a pretty big gain. I did not get in the lottery. I put my name in the hat. But I'm hoping to work out something with Achilles Foundation to where I can still run in this year's event. So we're trying to figure that out. But I thought that was pretty cool that they had 22% more people apply to run than they did the previous year. That's a big jump.
All right, so maybe this kind of piggybacks on this cutoff and aid station thing. Is there a better system than lotteries where you look at Hard Rock or Western States and some of the trail side of things, New York City, some of these where there's a lottery, sometimes people may never ever get in.
Yeah.
And you could argue that the lottery is the most, you know, democratic way or whatever word you want to use, but is there maybe a better way?
Yeah. I've never thought about it. I mean, from the standpoint of lotteries, so I'm a person of privilege here. I get into a lot of races just because.
Yeah.
Um, So I felt it a little bit when I got that rejection letter from New York City Marathon of like, what do you mean I can't run in this thing? Like that never really happens to me. So that was an interesting feeling, but I don't know. I mean, you're taking 200,000 runners. I mean, I don't know infrastructurally how else would you do it other than, I mean, you can't have tons of people reviewing applications, that's a lot of people.
Okay,
Um,
so with that,
I
let's
mean, the
look,
pros get in.
yeah, let's look at Hard Rock. Their system is essentially rewarding those runners that put in their time. And is that right or wrong? Is that
But
elitism?
but doesn't Hard Rock also have some controversy around their lottery about the split between men and women?
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I don't know it to that intricate level of if they separate their system by male female. Um,
Here, I'll give you some inside information on something to the listeners. So obviously, I'm always maybe it's not obviously. I do a lot of back and forth between UTMB. We're trying to influence UTMB to have more inclusion for adaptive athletes in not only just North America, but Oceania and the European, so in France. And so I'm in conversations very frequently with stakeholders in these groups. And the French team sent me something that said, well, if we're going to have a discussion about the way inclusion's done, let's use Western states. And they were basically saying how Western States only has like one or two spots for adaptive athletes, and UTMB has 12 this year. And I was like, well, let me tell you guys this. You guys have 10,000 runners at UTMB over the course of 5 days, and Western States has 342. So it's a little bit of a different deal with like permitting. I mean, the reason why Western States is so small is because the U.S. Forest Service only allows so many permits for people. And then you got to take into account people that are coming and crewing and volunteers. So the numbers they just didn't know. I don't think they knew that Western States in some of our races have a cap based upon land management. Whereas in Chamonix, I don't know if there's any land. I mean, I think you can have as many people as you want on it. But I thought that was interesting that they didn't know that. Maybe it's not a known thing in the world that the capacity of a race is not just because some guy, what is it, Craig Thornley, the RD, didn't just arbitrarily decide a number. It's because that's the permitting.
right.
Um, so I mean, if you do apples to apples, I was telling them, I'm like, well, if that's the case, then we need to have like 100 or 200 people, adaptive athletes over 10,000 athletes. You know what I mean? Like 12 to 10,000 was not a,
Right. Get the ratio right, right?
yeah. So I think there's always, and I always remind people there's always room for improvement. Once you do something, it's not the, all right, we've done it, we're done. It's always innovating to the next and listening to the culture and being flexible and always having that open mind of how can we do things better? And then you'll always have an amazing race.
Let's dive into the main set.
Let's do it.
Should I go first this week?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so let's talk about nervousness. And the reason I bring this up today is I was going back and forth with one of my athletes and an athlete that you know, and she expressed she's training for the London Marathon.
Mm,
And we talked about maybe squeezing in a half marathon as a training race
yeah,
the next few weeks. And she liked the idea, but she then proceeded to write about how she gets nervous and is is that a problem with a training race before her big race? And I'm going to read the email I sent back to her and open
yeah.
it up for discussion. So let me get it here. Okay, so here's my response to her questions and concerns about being nervous. I love this topic. Guess what? You will always be nervous. Being nervous is necessary. So do not try not to be nervous, as this will just make you more nervous. We want you to be nervous and excited at the same time. There are two types of nervousness. One is you are so nervous you hesitate and really do not like that feeling and abandon big goals and are too afraid to go for it. And the other is liking and embracing the nerves. And this gets you excited to see how close to perfect you can get. Most times, the first kind of nervousness comes from lack of preparation and dedication, and the second comes from just the opposite, pouring everything you can into your preparation. And you know where you fall. So see nervousness as your friend and a necessity for performance. Embrace the friend and expect it. And soon you will begin to fall in love with this feeling and want it more and more. And this is when the things shift from wanting success to loving the process and the journey, where it becomes a personal game you play with yourself and your goals. So bring on the half marathon. Perfect time to practice dealing with your new friend.
I like it. Nervousness. I've definitely had deep conversations around nervousness with my friend who you know, Fred. Fred helps me with a lot of this stuff. And we've come to an agreement that I use my nervousness as excitement because they border each other. And I've already established in my life that I definitely am always prepared. Like I'm not going to take something on and be underprepared. So nervousness is excitement, and it's a indicator for me to get into the zone and to like laser focus the right into the one point. And I think it can be your friend, like you said. So, but it doesn't happen overnight, and you got to basically work that skill set like you would anything else. So nervousness is just like working on your nutrition. It's just something that you build in. And I think this half marathon is a perfect place to experiment because you probably don't want to experiment with it on your A race like a London or a UTMB. So I think that's a good suggestion to go and experiment at the half. Plus you got people there, the vibe, the energy, the aid stations. It almost makes it easier than just going out and running 13.1 on your own.
Right.
So I like that you guys went down that road. And that athlete you're talking about, we won't say names, but I mean, she is one of the best blade runners in the world. So she's definitely on the overprepared side, or not overprepared, but she's put in the work.
Well, and I see it so often. I think the the age grouper athlete looks at the elites in any sport, elites professionals in any sport, and they think they they have confidence and they don't get nervous. And I think you and I both know that they probably get the most nervous and are probably the least confident that fuels them. And I think there's this expectation of, oh, because I'm nervous and not confident, then I'm not elite or I'm doing things wrong. But I guess my point today is that's exactly how you should feel.
Yeah, I think it's a sign of being human, to be honest.
Right.
I very rarely have met people in the sporting world that don't get nervous. I've met a few people. My brother was one who never got nervous before a wrestling match. The guy was, I don't know, he just did his thing. He maybe didn't care about the result, which made him even better, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but most of my teammates, I mean, yeah, UTMB week, you can feel the nerves in the house, you know? You can feel things are shifting, and it's just kind of part of um, being an athlete. And I think the key is, are you going to let it collapse you, or are you going to embrace it and let it be a way to bring in success? So it's something that you got to practice. It's not something that comes easy. And I think you got to like take it with grace and just know that everybody is probably experiencing this.
Yeah. And I think too with that, our brain is an organ, but it acts like a muscle. And so you hit it just right, is that just like we train our cardio system, we train our legs, we train our muscular skeletal system, we can train our brain just like the rest of our body. And you nailed it. It's like it takes practice and it takes the the awareness to know that, hey, nervousness is expected
Yeah.
and why it means something to you. It's why it's a good goal because it is really at the forefront of your thoughts and you want to do well, but maybe with this and how I ended that email to her is that if we start to fall in love with this feeling and not resist it, then our whole possibilities open up because now that's what the process is. And it's
Yeah.
less about the result and the success of it and more about that journey of loving yourself and that feeling of being nervous. And
Yeah.
that catapults on itself.
I kind of crave that feeling, to be honest.
Exactly.
I'm really interested to see how I handle it. And like, it's what you work so hard for. Is like, how are you, like you said, like embracing the process and you working at it and you love the process and you kind of want to take those moments as like checkpoints or check-ins to see how you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So I'm going to leave it here with a quote from one of my favorite rock musicians. He said, "Success is a poor excuse for happiness," and I think that kind of is a good way to just encapsulate all this of sometimes when we're nervous, it's because we have an expectation. And if we can switch that nervousness to excitement and not about expectations, that's where things maybe get a little easier.
Yeah, I mean, what even is success? Like that was something that on my own personal journey about 10 years ago, I set out to define what success was. And I wanted to meet as many people as I could from around the world to see what their definition of success is because I knew what I was taught and the people around me, but I wanted to get another perspective on what success is. And success can be anything. I think we're told success is one thing, and that might like lead to letdown. But for me, just to share about what my belief of success is showing up as best as you can in that moment. And that is success, and not letting it really dictate a result because the results can change depending on so many different factors. But as long as you show up as best as you can in that moment, I think that is success.
Yeah. And I see it all the time. Athletes, they're so, they get so in their head about expectations about their running and their racing or just their running in general. And they start, it's so weird. They start to have the success that they crave, and they don't allow themselves that success. They don't allow them to be successful, and they keep wanting it to be more. And if they really look back and reflected, they just accomplished everything they wanted to, but they're still unhappy about it. And
Totally.
that's a vicious cycle I see with a lot of age groupers is that, hey, they're doing everything they set out to do. And because their brain is conditioned to not allow themselves that success, they don't see that they're doing exactly what they wanted to do, and they're unhappy about it.
Yeah, I think people are scared to feel good about something or have a moment of content because then they may lose their edge. When in reality, I think you got to stop and appreciate those small successes or big successes. I mean, I'm kind of guilty of it myself. And this is kind of goes into the next thing we want to talk about, anyways, is coming back from injury. So I haven't been running or training since about like December 23rd. So I went 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks without running. So I'm just kind of not moving, thinking about running, thinking about racing, missing it, wanting to do it. But then I went back to like Sierra Zinel and like really felt that achievement. And I guess life happens quick. I never really got a chance to feel it. And I was like, whoa, I can't believe I did that thing and crossed the finish line and wasn't injured. And like, wow. And it was just interesting that it took me not moving to be able to appreciate that fully, 6 months later. And it just kind of taught me to maybe have just a bit more moments of stillness to appreciate the things that we were able to accomplish,
And
you know?
how did you go back to that moment to bring it to that successful moment? Like, what was that process? Is,
Well,
is this a Fred thing?
this might be a Fred thing. So I was pondering this thought of Sierra I know because when you can't move, like I mean I could move, but I have one foot, right? So when my foot is injured and I'm not moving right, I feel weird in my body because I'm not where I norm my baseline's changed. Um, and then I was thinking about Sierra Zinel and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I actually did that. Like that's a long way to go through the mountains, the biggest climbs of my life. It was tough, So I had already been thinking about it, and then I went to go see Fred on Sunday to work on my foot. And for people that don't know who Fred is, Fred's a guy that I work with. He does a lot of deep somatic transformational work. He changed my life. It's a longer story, but he does body work, but he goes really deep into your psyche, to your soul. It's a lot of energy work, but it's heavy lifting on your body. So I went up there to see him on Sunday. He's working on my foot. And all of a sudden, I'm on the table and I'm like, whoa. And he goes, what? Tell me. And I'm like, we're in the Sierra Zinel race right now. I'm looking up at the Hotel Weisshorn. I'm on my way up to this thing. And he starts asking me to describe what was around me and how I'm feeling. And it was all amazing. I was feeling like, wow, this race is going really well. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm nailing everything. This is amazing. And he kept asking me to like describe the feeling. And essentially, my life moved so quick that I never was able to sit in the moment and really take it all in. And his theory was my consciousness really sees my direction very clearly, and I'm headed this way, and my body's doing a lot of work, but I didn't appreciate what my body did for me. And my body kind of was like, yo, we're here, we're doing this, recognize this. And that was kind of maybe what started my foot injury.
Right.
So it was very interesting to be on a massage table in Northern California and describe seeing the 4,000-meter peaks in Switzerland with Fred. I was not expecting it, and this has happened to me. This is one of 100 stories that I have just like this. But every time I go there, I'm always like, well, yeah, it's just gonna work on my body, and it's gonna be no big deal. But in reality, we go every time somewhere. This is the second mountain we've been on together. One time we did a session, and I ended up on Cotopaxi with Fred and dealt with my fear, but that's another story. But yeah, so the injury, I found it helpful in my life.
So
I'm just
real
bummed.
quick, let's go back to that for a minute. So instead of what are we, 3 months, 4 months from Zagama? When was the race?
You mean Sears? I know.
Years and all. Yeah, yeah, sorry. So
Zagama's too fast for me right now.
yeah, I got them confused. Um, so how can you go through what you did with Fred, but immediately after the race, so there's not months in between that time frame?
I think you know how we build in workouts. We have trainings and we have a calendar. You and I work on training peaks, and we're putting things in. We put in this podcast today at noon on Thursday. You got to build in the moments to appreciate yourself, appreciate your body, give yourself recovery. You got to put them on the map. You got to put them on the calendar, and you got to do it just as hard as you do the other stuff. So that's what I learned. I mean, life is busy, and you do stuff, and you move on to the next thing, and we forget these little details that are actually big details.
So how
So
could someone do what you did with Fred the day after a race?
maybe it's not the day after.
Or,
Maybe
or what,
it's yeah,
at some point after the race, so it's still fresh. And again, you're not going through months and months
yeah.
without maybe going through that successful visualization.
I think for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on my calendar because things don't happen in my life unless it's on the calendar. They're not real for me unless it's on the calendar. If somebody wants to chat with me or I want to meet with someone, we got to put it on the calendar. And I think the same goes for this is I'm going to put these, maybe I'm going to take a Wednesday and I'm going to go to a hot springs and I'm going to sit down and reflect on the build up to the race, all that went into it. Maybe I'm going to run through the race again in my mind and feel those moments that were successful or see the moments that I could have done something differently, but appreciate them evenly and just have a lot of gratitude for my body. And then, pick yourself back up and go back, integrate yourself back into your life. But have a day, if you can do it, to go to a hot springs or go to a place that's quiet and a place that allows you to go in and have a lot of that reflection. I
That's
don't,
great.
I mean, you know me, I love those moments, but I don't put them in my calendar. I sometimes just like, oh, I'm going to go here on a Saturday, but now I'm going to put it in the calendar and make sure that I journal about it or whatever my process. Everybody's process is different, but I'm going to put as much emphasis on it and allow myself that space to celebrate the victory. You know?
I love that. I love that. It's just as important we do all the visualization before the race,
Yeah.
do it after, and learn what could have been better, learn what you did great, and move on. Yeah.
And you know that for that, this is just an example, but I was like, really, what kind of content do I want to share? I got these cool photos. What am I going to do? So I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Then I did a post, but I didn't really do it
Right.
for me, you know? So I think that was what I learned this week, which is all the information was there. I just needed Fred to put a mirror up and mirror it back to me.
Well, I love it. All right. So your health and injury.
Yeah, man. The foot, it's nerve-wracking. Um, I have a lot of nervousness around it. I wouldn't call it judgment, but just running around the track the other day, I felt like I had cinder blocks on my leg, on my feet. I'm like, man, like, because when I stopped running in December, right before I got hurt, you and I did like a mile test, and for me, I was smoking it,
Yeah.
and I felt fast. I felt just like whoa, like I was really on it. And now I'm looking down at my watch, and I'm like, damn, this is kind of hard. And it's like, oh, did I lose my power? Is my running? Is this is what it is? Like, so you get all these thoughts, and like I do a lot of inner work, so I know thoughts aren't the thing. I just observe it,
Yep.
and it floats away. But it's very interesting that those are some of the thoughts coming through, And I know it's a process of listening to your body, and you're not going to be where you were before. But I can't help it be like, I wonder if anybody else that comes back from injury, like what they go through or what, because I'm sure if you're a runner, you've definitely dealt with some niggles or something,
Well,
common.
and I think too, in line with our messaging about your visit with Fred of allowing success. I think sometimes, injury is hard and it's frustrating. And what sometimes can add to that is that the frustration becomes, oh, I'm losing my fitness or I'm losing my form.
Yeah.
I like to tell athletes, well, of course you are. That's why training works. So allowing yourself to realize that training really works and give yourself a pat on the back for all the hard work you did last year, because
Yeah.
that got you to the point of how you were feeling before the injury.
Yeah.
And now, if you went to the track this week and just picked up where you left off, then I'm not doing my job and you're not doing your job as an athlete because, then the training wasn't working. So
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
course you're going to lose it. And that's the unfortunate part. But with that, the body and the brain also never forgets what it's done.
Yeah.
And so it's not starting over because everything you've done up to this point is always with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now it's just a matter of getting back consistent. Once you get consistent, this will be like it never happened, but that's a really hard place to like see right now. And
Yeah.
it's just like anything. Hey, it's about today. What do
Yeah.
you do today to make tomorrow successful? And it's just, being smart too, you know,
Totally.
of, honoring the injury. Now it's not an injury, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't
It's
call
just,
it an injury anymore. I'm recovering from an injury and the soreness that I feel in my foot and stuff like what made me stop running, that feeling's gone for sure.
yep.
But there are some aches and some weird, I'm like, oh, what is this? Like, um, and yeah, I think it's just a little bit of like nervousness because of what happened. But I do leave every workout when I like yesterday when we wrapped up, I did 10 minutes walking and I did 20 minutes of run jog, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes in a row, and then like 90 seconds of walk. And then again, I left with a little bit of soreness, but that hopefulness of like, oh, I'm definitely, things are happening. Whereas before in December when I got injured, I left the track being like, oh shit, like, I don't know what this means. So I can tell the difference in the feelings. Um, and it's a process. And I think I just am really craving that groove of when you can go out and push it really hard. Nothing is hurting it. And you're just like, yeah, that was a good one. Like, you know what I mean? That feeling of like tough workouts. I'm missing a tough workout.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's also part of the process of, okay, now to me, you weren't talking like that, a month ago. And that to me tells you, okay, now you're ready. And that's the motivation to start getting consistent and using that want of harder workouts to be patient and to be consistent right now to get us to that point. And
Yeah.
keeping the whole season in perspective. And I think that's a vicious cycle that people maybe go through is that they've had to force time off, right? So now they're feeling good, and what's the tendency to do? And now
Go
I
right
gotta
back.
pick up the lost time, right?
Yep.
But now they're not smart. They're doing too much too soon, and they either peak too soon or hey, maybe they go backwards as far as whatever the injury was and having to take more time off. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid another.
Yeah. Because I feel like if I just jumped right back in and started hammering it, my Achilles would probably get hurt or something in my back, something else.
And that's just not appropriate.
Yeah.
We've got to go back and build a little bit of the foundation and maybe just a little bit more than what we would have if the time off was our choice, right? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think too, I know people have done this. You got to avoid the Google search of symptoms because you'll go down this weird rabbit hole where all of a sudden you got this disease or there's some sort of torn ligament. And even I did that still yesterday. I was like, oh, what's this pain in the middle of my foot? What could this be? And then that's what got me onto the plantar fasciitis. I don't even know what it is. I've heard about it tons, but I've never actually like looked it up. Um, I hope I never experienced it or I never will. But what is it? Because it seems like it's a common running injury that I've heard over and over again. If someone's like, "Oh yeah, I took time off because of my plantar or my plantar fired up," or even when I was at the foot doctor, they were like, "Oh, have you ever had plantar?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." Um, so what is it? How does it happen? How do people
Yeah,
prevent it?
it's pretty common, and it's pretty devastating. Like it's
Is it
pretty
forever or is it
schizophrenic.
temporary?
Um, it, it, where it becomes challenging, it's unlike a lot of other types of injuries in that everybody kind of experiences it in a little different way. For example, one athlete might have it and they deal with it for a month and it goes away and it never ever come back again.
Hmm.
Other athletes, hey, they may have it, it's something they're dealing with for years and years and years. And it's essentially the fascia underneath the heel of your foot gets tight, and
Mm.
that causes pain on the bottom of the heel. Unlike maybe on the back of the heel, like where the Achilles is, that's not plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis is severe pain on the bottom of your heel.
Interesting.
Most times, this comes about from something that's going on with the calf.
Mm.
And this is where I get frustrated is that many times in the medical side of things, when someone gets plantar fasciitis, they treat the heel. And with most injuries, most times where you feel it is just a symptom of, and not the origin, that
Yeah.
something else is causing pain here. So very rarely is plantar fasciitis a heel problem or a heel source. It's coming from the calf. So the calf gets tight for a variety of reasons and it becomes chronic. And a lot of times athletes won't even know that this is going on because it's maybe not very painful or very little discomfort at all. But the calf gets tight, that seizes up, it gets really tight. Therefore, it reduces the mobility of the leg and the calf and places stress down below in the heel, in the foot, because we still have to get that mobility. So we're forcing mobility in other areas that's not a good area for that mobility to take place. So the essentially the plantar fasciitis gets overworked, tight, and now your heel hurts, but it's a calf problem. And so treating the calf, and I get questions on YouTube all the time, is that most times if you look at the calf, you're going to find probably a golf size ball knot in that calf. That's the problem, and that's what you've got to work out.
Interesting. So there is a manageable solution.
Totally. Yep. Yeah. I know it because I mean, I've had people, it gets so devastating for people. I've had people come from all over the country to visit me for plantar fasciitis, and we take care of it in a day,
So you're the plantar fasciitis whisperer.
kind of.
Do you think that's one of the most common running injuries? Would you call it an injury or would you call it just a
Well,
syndrome? Or
that's a great question. In writing Born to Run 2, we called them wobbles. I don't consider plantar fasciitis or IT band or tightness injuries because um,
okay,
it's something that's going on with how you're using your body. I would consider an injury a sprained ankle. Hey, we're out ripping a trail and you sprain your ankle. You fall and you break your wrist. That's an injury. You tweak your knee. That's an injury. Plantar fasciitis, tightness, all this is what I can call like dysfunction because of how you're using your body. And I just, that might sound like semantics, but if we start not calling it injury, we maybe look at it in a different way.
Yeah, I was careful about using the word injury because it puts a lot of power behind something. I
Yep.
don't think I've never seen plantar fasciitis show up on an NFL injury report, so maybe it can't be an injury.
It's been there. I'm trying to think.
Has it?
Yeah, I think Peyton Manning
Interesting.
experienced plantar fasciitis later in his career.
Huh.
Maybe when he was with the Broncos in the Super Bowl year.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, yeah, it's all about the calf, really. And
So,
anybody out there who's listening, if you have plantar fasciitis, have your partner lay down on your stomach, have your partner massage the heck out of your calves, and you're gonna find the culprit.
yeah, my calves are always tight, or my only calf is always tight. It's always brutal.
Yep, yep. So
So this next part of the show here, so we're wrapped up the injury talk.
yep,
I feel pretty good about it. I remember I told you I wanted to like highlight a race.
yes.
I found a race. And I just went with a local race. So I live in Northern California. So I went with the Napa Marathon, which just happened this past weekend.
Okay.
But there was like some really impressive performances that went down. So we got Garrett Coracon, who I actually know. He goes by Garrett the Parrot on Instagram. He actually drove me to the start line of Sierra Zinel at like super early in the morning, like 4:30 in the morning. This guy got up to drive me like half an hour to the start line. He ran a 2:15:47
Nice.
trail guy,
Nice.
so it's blazing fast. And I think this is also was the USA Track and Field national thing for the marathon. And then the female Carolina Garcia from Irving, Texas. I don't know her, but she ran a 2:43:24.
And
2:43:23, excuse
when
me.
I hear Napa, my brain automatically goes to hills. Is this a pretty flat course?
I think it could be a net downhill.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. I didn't look at the course profile. It popped up on my radar because I think I got something in my inbox from something on my email, and then I just happened to see Garrett's thing on social. I'm like, dang, that's quick. I didn't realize Garrett was running 2:15s. That's pretty badass.
Nice.
And
You
then
know what trail races he's got planned for the year?
probably Golden Trail Series. I think he was the highest placing male from the U.S. maybe at the final last year. He did really well at the end. Super nice guy. I think he lives in Colorado. Yeah, he was just. I met him this past summer when we stayed in the same house for a
Nice.
few days.
Very good.
And then yeah, Carolina with her 2:43:24 is super quick too. So maybe one of these days I'll hop out there to Napa. It's like an hour or two away. And I really have only done one road marathon, but road marathoning is interesting
Mm.
for at least for me right now. I love trails, love mountains, but something's there with the roads.
Well, and I always say, getting back to maybe speed before endurance, is that for those trail runners out there, ultra runners especially, training for a flat marathon can be sometimes the best development you can do for your ultra running because
Yeah,
now you're getting a
yeah.
little more turnover.
Weren't you telling me that speed translates to like climbing, like hill climbing?
Well, when it's oftentimes I'll use flatter running early season to get that consistent turnover and cadence that then translates to your climbing later in the program. You know,
Speed never hurts anybody. Let's just
right.
say that.
Well, and oftentimes, especially those ultra runners who are able to run trails year round, they often begin to eliminate those flat and long runs.
Yeah.
And that those flat, long, steady, consistent cadence runs helps your efficiency. And so I've even noticed with myself is that um, typically my flat running takes place in the winter, But the last few years, we had so good trail running on snow that I stopped doing my flat running, and I became really strong in the mountains. But I noticed that I lost some efficiency from those flat, fast. I wouldn't say flat and fast all the time, but just flat, even if it's zone two, the
Yeah.
turnover is much quicker than when you're on trail. And I
Yeah. I
lost.
mean, Adrian did a half marathon in Houston before Tarawera. He
Yeah,
PR'd. I think he said he ran like 68,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
pretty quick.
So that turnover translates to on the trail because trails make us strong, but they make us slow. And if that's all we're doing, we're just we're losing that turnover.
Maybe it was 78. What's more realistic, 68 or 78?
68. Or
68. Yeah, the world record just got broke. It was like 56 something, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, before I forget, congrats to Carolina and congrats to Garrett on the Napa champs.
Awesome. All right, and then I've got call to action in our cool down. So I've been having these thoughts for a while now. Is that sustainability has become kind of the buzzword within the industry. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of running brands who have latched on to the sustainability message and
Totally.
being more green. And the irony I'm starting to see is that many of the major run influencers are shoe reviewer influencers, where shoe reviews, especially on YouTube, I mean, they're probably some of the most viewed run content out there.
Yeah.
And so, my question to the audience and for us to ponder is there a better way to execute shoe reviews? Because you see these shoe reviewers in the back of their little
Yeah. They got,
shoe, they've got hundreds of shoes lined up. And so they're essentially wearing these shoes maybe once or twice, doing a review, and it goes on the shelf.
could they just donate it?
I'm sure they do. Um, but is that donation really beneficial? I'm sure there are in some space out there, but I guess, is there a better way to execute shoe reviews than to waste all these shoes that maybe are just again sitting on a shelf and
Yeah.
going for no purpose? So
Well,
again, not an opinion, it's just something
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
starting to think about to throw out there, maybe to hear from people, and if they have some ideas of maybe how we could do shoe reviews differently.
Here's an observation that I saw this year at TRE.
Mhm.
There was some influencers that came to TRE and they went by, like the On booth. On had the new Cloud Ultra 3 and the Cloud Ultra Pro, which are coming out in June. And that was a big item that people were coming to the booth with their cameras and they were reviewing the shoe. But there was only one shoe in circulation there. They weren't handing the shoes out, but people came by the booth and did their 4-minute video on the shoe specs and the feel of it and the fabric. And then they had Jeff Colt there who had worn the shoe in a couple of races on site and answering any questions rather than giving out samples of the shoe, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, but that's pretty common because most, the timing, especially now, the shoes aren't available until about now. So
Yeah, yeah.
now's the time where all these influencers are getting the shoes sent to them. And um,
Do you think it's important that people review the shoes, or do you think that's kind of overkill? Like, what's the purpose of even putting it in the hands of somebody?
well, I think it's a huge advantage for the brand and the influencer because they're some of the most viewed content out there and people see it as really helpful. So I think we've gone too far. We're never going backwards because the shoe reviewer is a very valuable influencer for the brand because they're getting in front of millions and millions of people to talk about shoes and to talk
So, what
about.
happened 20 years ago? What did they do? What did brands do before there was influencers?
Well, it's the same way in a different way. It would be magazines. You'd go back in the
Okay.
back of the magazine and here are the top 10 trail shoes of the year and read about it. And part of the advertising for the magazine would be from the brand as well.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in a different way, but there is much less shoes being distributed out to these people. Now they're going to so many people, and these shoes are being worn maybe once or twice, and they're doing a quick review. There's some out there that they'll put in 100 miles or so. Everybody kind of does it differently. But again, I just thought is like, well, maybe, what really, maybe the better question is, what really are happening with these shoes?
Yeah.
Are they being donated? Are they going to a useful um, purpose that supersedes the wastefulness of the shoe?
I watched a documentary this past summer in Chamonix. I went to the theater, and a guy who does a lot of drawing. He's friends with Killian. He's connected to Normal. I forget his name right now, but he did a documentary about this place in Alaska that somehow shoes end up because of the current in the ocean. So there's this like pristine beach in Alaska that's beautiful. You got like wildlife, it's in the middle of nowhere, but for whatever reason, the shoes end up there. And it's something about like lost shoe. But it was very interesting to watch it and to hear about how many shoes actually end up in the landfill and all that stuff. I had no idea.
Because of like a floating landfill that like
Yeah,
return?
maybe we can find the
Okay.
doc and put it in the show notes. But yeah, it was just and it's Alaska of all places, some like pristine nature, and it was just like weird to be walking on the beach and he found these like shoes that were from all over the world that were just on this random beach.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, let's look into that. All right, so there's our call out. You guys out there listening to this, give us some ideas, or maybe you guys know, is there a better way we can utilize these shoes that shoe reviewers are sticking on their shelf? So we'll leave it
I
there.
love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has
Number
been an
two
awesome episode,
down.
number two.
Hey, thanks, man. Good seeing you. We'll
Good seeing you.
see you next week and see you guys next week. Later.